Thailand. The name glows with allure, a paradise, a playground, a promise. But beneath the lights of Bangkok's infamous alleyways, past the glowing temples and flowing cocktails, there's a silence. And in that silence, there are stories. Stories that don't make it into brochures. They say this is the land of smiles. But what if the smile isn't joy? What if it's currency? What does it mean when a country becomes the fantasy of millions? When the most photographed faces don't belong to influencers, but to women who never signed up to be symbols. In cities like Pattaya and Patpong, the economy doesn't rest on exports or agriculture. It breathes through desire. And the desire is for her. She's been called exotic, mysterious, obedient, dangerous. But what happens when she stops smiling? What happens when fantasy meets fatigue? For decades, the world came here for paradise. But paradise is built on someone else's labor. And sometimes, on someone else's body. This isn't just about nightlife. It isn't just about tourists. It's about what a nation becomes when attention pays more than education, when image outprices identity. Because in Thailand, the most shocking stories don't live in jungles or temples. They live where no one bothers to look behind the smile that greets you at the door. They come for the beaches, the temples, the festivals, a land where incense dances through the air and the past seems to whisper from every corner. Thailand promises an escape. But what if the escape belongs to someone else? This is a country shaped by contrasts, ancient kingdoms and LED billboards, street monks and sex shows, and somewhere between tradition and transaction, something got lost. For centuries, Thailand remained unconquered, its borders untouched by colonial boots. A nation proud of its sovereignty, its culture, its calm, but sovereignty comes with a cost. And sometimes that cost is invisibility. In the aftermath of wars that left its neighbors reeling, Thailand turned to tourism, not just as an industry but as identity. It wasn't accidental, it was strategic. In the 1960s, American soldiers on leave from Vietnam flooded Bangkok's streets. What began as rest and recreation slowly became reputation. By the 1980s, the myth had matured. Thailand as the land of spiritual awakening and sensual escape, a country that could sell serenity by morning and surrender by night. But how does a culture survive when its most marketable image isn't one it created but one it was cornered into wearing? That's the question this journey seeks to answer. Not to judge, not to gawk, but to listen to what's been buried beneath the image. The goal isn't to expose Thailand, but to understand what it means to be exposed for too long. To trace the shadows behind the smiles, to ask who profits from paradise and who pays for the picture. Because something strange happens when a place becomes a product. It stops being seen as a home and starts being treated as a service. So we follow the stories that weren't told on the travel blogs, the whispers behind the lantern-lit doorways, the truths hidden in crowded trains, empty villages, and fading billboards. And by the time we reach reality number 9, what began as fascination will feel very different. If a smile can be sold, what else in this land is quietly up for sale? Number 1. The illusion of desire. Thai women in the tourism of sex. There are cities where dreams are sold, and in Thailand, desire is the most expensive one. In Pattaya, the night doesn't fall, it explodes. Streets glow with fluorescent blues and pulsing reds, cutting through the dark like electric veins. The hum of scooters, the shuffle of sandals on concrete, the distant thump of bass that never quite fade. At first glance, it all feels theatrical. Bars with open fronts, women leaning out like mannequins in motion, laughter echoing from inside corners that most visitors pretend they never entered. Men, mostly foreign, move in slow loops, scanning the smiles, making their choices. It looks like freedom. It's sold as fantasy. But here everything has a price. And in most cases the price isn't what it seems. This industry, the so-called entertainment economy, isn't a side business. It's infrastructure. From massage parlors in Chiang Mai to rooftop clubs in Bangkok, it's stitched into the country's financial veins. The Thai GDP benefits quietly, discreetly, while the faces on the street become both the product and the marketing. And this isn't new. In the 1960s, American soldiers on leave from the war next door brought their paychecks and appetites with them. What started as wartime rest became post-war demand, and as those same men returned home, they carried with them stories of women who smiled and served, stories that turned into myths, and myths that fueled a global market. Many are migrants from poor villages in the Northeast, from the borderlands, from places where school ends at 12 and choices shrink fast. Some come willingly, chasing better futures. Others arrive through promises that disappear quickly. Here, work is layered in language. The bar girl, the hostess, the dancer, the girlfriend experience. But behind each label is the same exchange. Presence for payment, affection for time, intimacy, real or feigned for the cost of a round-trip flight, and a few rounds of beer. The Western gaze shaped this world, but Thailand built it, adapted it, packaged it. It's no longer just men looking for something, they're met by a machine that knows how to respond. But what happens to a person when they become part of that machine? There's a performance to every interaction. The tilt of the head, the sweetened tone, the feigned affection. It becomes muscle memory, survival instinct. And eventually the mask and the face become hard to separate. This isn't about moral outrage. It's about something quieter, the erosion of self beneath the pressure of performance. When affection becomes a transaction, what's left behind when the customer walks away? And what about the children of this industry? Those born into it, around it, raised beside its glow. What future do they see? Standing in doorways their mothers once stood in. In Thailand, desire isn't hidden, it's spotlighted. But that doesn't make it understood. Because when culture is repackaged for sale, it stops reflecting the people who live it. It starts mirroring the ones paying for it. And in that mirror, something very real begins to disappear. But the story doesn't end here. The true weight of this illusion doesn't come crashing down in the clubs or on the streets. It comes later, quieter, colder, where the smile no longer sells and the fantasy starts to break. That reckoning comes in number 9. But first, there's another face to the smile that Thailand wears. One that says everything is fine, even when it's not. Number 2. A smile that hides everything. In Chiang Mai, early mornings start in stillness. Monks in saffron robes move barefoot through quiet streets, bowls in hand, eyes lowered, not as a sign of submission, but discipline. The scent of jasmine mixes with smoke from incense, as tourists fumble with cameras and coins, unsure if they're interrupting or participating. This is the image. Calm, composed, sacred, and everywhere you turn a smile. On the vendors offering mango sticky rice, on the school children reciting morning prayers, on the guards at luxury malls whose uniforms sit too tightly under the heat. A country where smiling isn't a reaction, it's an expectation. The world calls Thailand the land of smile. Travel posters, YouTube thumbnails, even airport welcome signs echo the phrase like a promise. But what if the smile isn't joy at all? What if it's something learned, like etiquette, like dress code? In Thai culture, emotional restraint is deeply embedded, rooted in the Buddha Buddhism, in centuries of monarchic hierarchy. The ideal is Mai Pen Rai. Never show anger, never complain, never cause discomfort. The smile in this context is a shield, a way to preserve face, maintain balance, avoid shame. But over time, when that smile becomes mandatory, something else begins to grow in its shadow. Thailand is one of the friendliest places a traveler might ever experience. The hospitality feels endless, but beneath that warmth is a silence that can be hard to notice, unless you're listening closely. It's the kind of silence that stretches across family dinners, across therapy sessions that never happen, across teenage bedrooms where questions remain unanswered. Mental health in Thailand remains largely unspoken, especially among the young. Suicide rates among youth have steadily risen, especially in rural areas where the pressure to succeed competes with the weight of poverty. And in cities, the expectation to mask every difficulty with a grin doesn't just hide pain, it reinforces it. A child who loses their job, smile. A man who can't make rent, smile. A woman who wants out of her marriage but has no way out, smile. The smile becomes the default, because the alternative, voicing discontent, admitting vulnerability, isn't just discouraged, it's often quietly punished. And what happens when the world validates the mask? When tourists land expecting smiles, When online reviews praise how nice everyone is, without asking what that niceness costs, it creates a system where silence is rewarded, where the pressure to appear okay outweighs the freedom to be honest. In temples, monks chant about impermanence, about detachment, and while these teachings offer peace to some, they've also become tools to suppress emotional response. Struggle is explained away as karma. Sadness is labeled as lack of mindfulness. Depression becomes something to endure rather than address. There's something deeply respectful about this culture of calm, but there's also something worrying when serenity becomes a cover for suffering. Not long ago, a prominent Thai actress vanished from the public eye. Fans speculated. The press stayed quiet. Months later, it surfaced. She had quietly entered a psychiatric hospital. Her return was met with celebration but never a real conversation. Just more smiles. More apologies for making people worry. This isn't about blaming culture. It's about understanding how expectations evolve and how they trap the people forced to meet them. Because when emotional honesty is seen as weakness, it creates an environment where people bleed internally, silently, and those smiling faces in the markets, in the hotels, on the streets. Many of them are holding back storms no one will ever see. The smile was never for you. It was for survival. But what if survival requires more than just politeness? What if it demands a different kind of confrontation? One that doesn't come with incense or folded hands. Because in another corner of Thailand, there's a different divide. One between those who rise above the flood and those who sink every time the rain returns. Number 3. The rich live on hills. The poor sink with the rain. In Sukhumvit, the sky stretches wide above polished rooftops. Champagne glistens in tall glasses. Pools glimmer in the sun, even when the streets below run dark with water. Up here the air is still, clean, curated. But go 15 kilometers outward, past the shopping districts and high-speed rails, and the water tells a different story. Bangkok was never meant to rise this tall. Built on a swamp, a shifting delta, the city sinks each year. Literally, the concrete multiplies, and the ground keeps giving way. And when the rain comes, and it always does, it doesn't fall evenly. The wealthiest live above it. Quite literally. Their homes are designed to escape the problem. Elevated roads, private shuttles, and drainage systems that keep water flowing away from property lines. But for millions of others, the rain doesn't drain. It waits. It climbs. It drowns. In districts like Thonburi and Lac Krabang, families live in makeshift wooden homes built along canals that overflow with every storm. Narrow alleys become rivers. Children wade barefoot through sewage. Shops shut down for weeks. Entire neighborhoods lose power before the floodwaters even reach their peak. And these aren't rare disasters. They're expected. The Thai government spends billions on infrastructure, but most of it rises in the business zones. The malls, the condos, the tech court. It's hard to ignore the contrast. Glass towers reaching into the clouds while floodwaters choke the homes of workers who built them. You'll hear phrases like climate resilience, sustainable urban growth in glossy presentation. But none of that matters when a mother spends each monsoon season moving her furniture onto cinder blocks, praying the water doesn't reach her child's bed. The irony: many of those trapped by the flood come from provinces that once fed this entire region. Izan, Phetchabun, Mae Hong Son. They left to escape droughts, unstable harvests, and poverty. But in Bangkok they traded nature's unpredictability for the predictability of urban neglect. Even emergency aid feels uneven. Boats arrive late, if at all. Roads are cleared first near embassies and luxury hotels. In slum communities, residents build bamboo walkways and plastic bridges on their own, tying them together with ropes and prayers. There's no stronger symbol of Thailand's economic divide than water. What flows past one man's garden pool rises into another man's kitchen. And yet the story isn't just economic. It's cultural. In Thailand, status has long dictated survival. From the royal courts of Ayutthaya to today's gated enclaves, hierarchy is built into the landscape, both physically and socially. Up means privilege, down means indifference. And so in a country famous for harmony, there's a quiet war happening each year, where one part of the city celebrates the storm as atmosphere, while another counts every drop as a threat. In the land of temples, inequality builds its own, and while the floodwaters rise, there's another kind of erosion happening, less visible but just as dangerous. The erosion of trust, the sense that help will come, the belief that fairness exists, and that erosion has its own consequences. Number 4. The island you booked doesn't exist. The water looks perfect from the air, emerald and endless, broken only by scattered limestone cliffs rising like monuments from the sea. Online, it's sold as untouched, pristine, a secret waiting for those bold enough to book it. But when the boat engine cuts, and the dock comes into view, the myth starts to fray. This is Fi-Fi, or what's left of it. On shore, the welcome signs are sun-bleached, bent. Tour groups shuffle off boats like clockwork. Umbrellas raised, matching wristbands on. Vendors line the beach with neon towels and imported sunglasses. Underneath it all, plastic. Beneath the thin layer of sand, trash bags, cigarette butts and plastic forks crushed by time. Once, Maya Bay was one of the most photographed places on Earth. After the beach was released in 2000, tourism exploded. What was a quiet marine sanctuary became an Instagram set. At its peak, nearly 6,000 people arrived daily, sometimes stepping over coral just to find the perfect selfie angle. That number doesn't come without consequences. Coral reefs already fragile were trampled, suffocated by sunscreen and churned by boat propellers. Marine species vanished. Blacktip reef sharks, once abundant, retreated. Turtles stopped nesting. The water changed color, and the silence, once broken only by waves, was drowned by engines, whistles and Bluetooth speakers. In 2018, Thai authorities shut it down completely. Maya Bay was closed to visitors. Boats banned. A rare moment where the government put ecology ahead of economy. But it was too late for some things. The bay reopened years later under heavy restrictions. Fewer boats, time slots, no swimming. But what you see today isn't the island from the travel brochures. It's a version of recovery. A curated second chance. A reminder that the fantasy so often sold was never real to begin with. And this isn't just about one beach. Koh Lipe, Koh Tao, Railay, Krabi. Entire coastal ecosystems are now in a constant state of damage control. The same tourists who come seeking untouched nature bring with them the very things that destroy it: plastic bottles, fast fashion, careless hands, and expectations that everything should be accessible, photographable and clean. Even so-called eco-resorts are often just rebranded businesses, built over mangroves, running diesel generators behind the scenes, offering bamboo straws while dumping waste into the sea at night. The irony is hard to ignore. In seeking paradise, people have rewritten it, and in the process erased the original version, one tide at a time. Ask the locals who still remember what it looked like before the first cruise ship docked. They'll tell you about green water so clear you could see fish before stepping in. They'll talk about long-tail boats as transport, not photo props. About beaches where you were more likely to see a hermit crab than a human. But those memories are disappearing along with the coral, the species and the silence. And the illusions still sell. Packages still advertise undiscovered beaches. Though there are none, influencers still pose on white sand, their captions edited to hide the litter just out of frame. Tour operators rename crowded islands with softer words. Hidden gems, secluded sanctuaries, off the grid. But the grid is already there. Loud, leaking, overbooked. They closed Maya Bay, but the damage was already done. And just beyond the coastline, in the cities that built these marketing fantasies, another kind of illusion is kept alive. One far harder to shut down. One that doesn't depend on boats or beaches, but on silence. Number 5. Bangkok's underground, where laws don't go. The skyline tells one story. Glass towers reflecting the sun. Roads humming with routine. But below it, beneath the traffic and blinking billboards, another Bangkok breathes. One without permits, without sirens, and without name. Down the side of a soi, near Ratchada, past the bars with neon signs in English,
There's a basement club. No signage. Just a man with a phone, waiting for the right nod. Inside, the room is full before midnight. Music too loud for comfort. Money changing hands and cameras covered with tape. Here the rules don't apply because they were never invited. This is a city with laws. But more importantly, it's a city with arrangements. The unspoken system runs through from small street vendors bribing municipal officers just to keep a cart in place, to full-scale illegal casinos hiding behind empty shop fronts. In places like Wai Kwang or Charing Krung, locals know which buildings don't close at night. They also know which ones are never touched by police. The real economy isn't always in the numbers reported. It's in the transactions no one tracks. It's in the locked rooms where phones go silent, where names are only whispered, and where a favor is worth more than any signature. In 2022, a nightclub burned in Chonburi. It wasn't licensed, no emergency exits. Soundproofed so tightly, no one outside could hear the screams. 17 people died. What followed was silence. Just as the except for the government lottery. In practice, it thrived. From cockfights to baccarat, high-stakes games continue in rooms guarded by men in plain clothes. Some of these same rooms have security systems more advanced than the police stations nearby. The irony isn't lost. It's just ignored. And then there are the massage parlors. Some are legitimate. Many are fronts. Some operate with code words full service. VIP treatment. Happy menu. Others don't bother hiding it. They rely on protection. Not the kind you buy in stores, but the kind that shows up when someone threatens to ask questions. Behind the back doors, human trafficking, undocumented workers, teenagers too scared to run, too invisible to be missed. People think corruption is chaotic. In Thailand, it's organized, efficient, deep-rooted. Every officer has a superior. Every superior knows when to look away, and sometimes those who look too closely don't last long. Reporters have tried. Some are still missing. Others switched to covering festivals and weather. The most telling thing about Bangkok's underground isn't how hidden it is. It's how close it sits to the surface. A club beside a temple, a drug house beside a daycare. And yet somehow the city continues ordered, polite, smiling, but scratch beneath the courtesy, and you'll find networks more stable than any democracy, more enduring than any constitution. There are stories of police raids, where the tip-off came from inside, where the lights go out just before entry, files vanish, and no one is arrested. Stories of raids that never happen at all because the building belongs to someone with too much influence to inconvenience. Bangkok is sold as safe, as stable, but stability can be manufactured too. And in a city that never sleeps, silence isn't peace, it's protection. Because when systems like this work too well underground, you begin to wonder what else is being buried just out of view.
Number 6. The Thai Education Mirage. It's morning in Ubon Ratchathani. A bell rings in a school without walls. Children sit on cracked plastic chairs, fans spinning above their heads, so slowly they might as well be still. A whiteboard stained with yesterday's chalk leans crooked behind the teacher's desk. The lesson? Repetition. Memorization. Rote phrases copied from outdated textbooks, printed when flip phones were still considered advanced. 2 hours away by plane, in a gated school in Bangkok, a different class begins. MacBooks out, smartboards on, native English speakers lead project-based discussions, while another teacher records attendance on a tablet. Here, the students speak 3 languages. They're preparing for Cambridge exams, international placements, and futures without borders. Same country, different planets. Thailand likes to speak proudly of its literacy rate. On paper, it's above 90%. But in practice, literacy doesn't equal access. It doesn't mean opportunity. It doesn't mean fairness. The public education system here is split, not just by funding but by expectation. Rural schools receive the bare minimum. In some districts, one teacher handles 3 grade levels. Science labs sit unused. Internet is a maybe. These schools train children to follow, not to question, to memorize, not to understand. And yet they're told to compete on the same national exams as the elite. It's a caste system in everything but name. Private schools flourish, funded by the wealthy, the powerful, and the connected. They teach critical thinking, business acumen, global perspective. Their students will enter universities with prestige attached to their surnames. Their futures are already spoken for, lined with safety nets. In contrast, rural students are told education is the key to escaping poverty. But the lock was changed a long time ago. There are countless examples, like a boy from Nan province who walks 3 kilometers to school each day, only to study from textbooks that haven't been updated in 10 years. He dreams of becoming a pilot, but the math curriculum he's using was last reviewed when commercial drones didn't even exist. Compare that to a girl at an international school in Chiang Mai, who already interns with a local startup at 16. Her assignments are digital, her contacts global. These are not isolated stories, they're patterns, built into the structure. And when these students graduate, the gap only widens. Universities favor those who've passed private tutoring centers and entrance exams designed to reward the resourced. Even public university seats quietly go to those who can afford preparation. The ones who can't, they become the workforce for the very elite their tuition funded. Education here isn't a ladder, it's a mirror, one that reflects who you were born to be, not who you could become. And the problem isn't just economic, it's political. Curriculum reforms are announced, pilot programs are launched, but change moves slowly, and only in places where it doesn't threaten existing power. Because an uncritical population is easier to manage. It's safer to fund compliance than to empower critique. Some teachers know this. They try to resist. A few even go off script, bringing in outside resources, encouraging debate, teaching digital literacy, but they do so at their own risk. The system prefers silence. The result, generations of talent, undiscovered, untrained, unequipped. And while the world pushes forward with AI, blockchain, and quantum computing, entire provinces here are stuck reciting phrases from a past that no longer exists. What if the only way up is already sold to someone else? And what happens to the ones who refuse to accept that answer? Number 7. The Forgotten Tribes of the North. The road north twists through mountains that catch clouds in their arms. Patches of farmland cling to hillsides, and wooden huts sit on stilts above the fog. Tourists pass through for the photos, the vibrant embroidery, the silver jewelry, the bright smiles of children chasing each other barefoot along muddy paths. But they leave without asking the only question that matters. Who are these people really? In northern Thailand, near the borders with Myanmar and Laos, or the ones left out of the national story, the Karen, the Hmong, the Akha, and several other indigenous groups who have lived on these lands longer than many Thai cities have stood. Their languages are different, their dress is distinct, and their history, written in oral stories and migration trails, never quite made it into the textbooks. Some arrived fleeing war, others were already here before borders were drawn. Yet even after decades, their place in Thai society is still uncertain, because legally, many of them do not exist. Without citizenship, they cannot vote. They cannot legally work. They cannot open a bank account or receive health care. Their births aren't always recorded. Their deaths often go unnoticed, and their futures are shaped by the limitations of a system that treats them as guests in a home they never left. The impact goes beyond paperwork. Without ID cards, their children can't attend proper school. Many grow up speaking their tribal language, only to enter a national curriculum that expects fluent Thai by grade 1. It's a setup for failure. Then comes the next layer, the one that rarely makes it into tourism brochures: trafficking. Border villages, already isolated and under-resourced, become easy targets. Children vanish from communities with alarming frequency. Some are promised jobs in the city, only to be funneled into labor rings or work. Others are taken by networks that know precisely where to look, where no one is watching and no one is counting. NGOs try to intervene. They build clinics, offer mobile ID registration, set up safe houses, but the scale is overwhelming. The hills hide more than just beauty. They hide what no one is prepared to confront: the price of exclusion. Even the few who do receive citizenship face barriers: racism, lack of infrastructure, a job market that's skeptical of unfamiliar names and accents. And when resources are scarce, it's the hill tribes who are blamed for taking too much, even when they receive far too little. There's irony in how the same culture that's photographed, performed, and packaged for tourists is marginalized the moment the cameras turn off. Their traditions are celebrated at festivals, but their basic rights, still debated. Some tribes have begun adapting, selling crafts, guiding treks, participating in cultural tourism, but even here the power dynamic remains unequal. The profits rarely reach the community. Tour operators take the cut. The tribes become props in a story written without them. And then there's the other path: resistance. A growing number of tribal youth are choosing to stay and fight. They study law, medicine, and policy, using education as a weapon against invisibility. But it's a slow process, hindered by decades of neglect. Every step forward is met with a reminder of how far behind they were forced to start. They live in Thailand, but on paper they don't exist. And in a country where presence determines protection, what happens when even the law looks the other way? Number 8. The war on drugs that never ended. The sun rises over Isan differently. It's quieter, drier, and far from the polished tourist trails. This part of Thailand has become the backdrop for a war that's been raging for decades, long after the headlines moved on. At first glance, there's no sign of conflict, just rice fields stretching into haze, families gathered around metal pots, roosters crowing from corrugated rooftops. But when the trucks roll in, black armored and loaded with officers in tactical gear, the whole village knows they've come again. Thailand's war on drugs officially began in 2003, under then Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra. It was swift, brutal, and messy. Thousands of people, some guilty, many not, were marked for elimination, arrested, beaten, disappeared. By the time the international community raised questions, the momentum had already taken on a life of its own. That momentum never really stopped. Today the uniforms have changed, the language is more measured, but the methods remain alarmingly familiar. Entire communities in Isan, Thailand's northeast, are under constant surveillance. One tip, one neighbor's whisper, or even a wrong look during a checkpoint stop, and your name ends up on a list. That list is long. Young men, especially from poor families, are disproportionately targeted. In some villages, nearly every family has someone who's been detained, often for methamphetamine pills known locally as yaba, a cheap, accessible drug used as a stimulant among laborers. It's illegal, but in a region with few job prospects and long workdays, it's also everywhere. Thailand has one of the highest incarceration rates in the world. Overcrowded prisons are bursting with low-level drug offenders, many sentenced to decades for possessing just a handful of pills. The jails are so packed that prisoners sleep head to foot, bodies pressed like sardines, with fans whirring overhead and no space to turn. And then there are the raids. No warrant, no warning, just flashlights in faces at plastic cuffs and questions barked in dialects that some villagers barely understand. Confess now, and the sentence will be lighter, they're told. But many don't even know what they're confessing to. Once inside the system, it's hard to get out. Court backlogs can stretch for years. Bail is expensive, and public defenders are often overwhelmed, sometimes representing over 100 clients at once. Families go into debt trying to pay legal fees, only to watch their sons disappear behind prison walls anyway. There's an even darker layer to all of this: corruption. In some areas, local authorities use drug charges as leverage to settle scores, to intimidate activists, to maintain control. A small bribe might erase a name from the list, or add one, and once that reputation sticks, even if you're acquitted, the damage is permanent. Employers won't hire. Neighbors start to whisper. You become that guy, that risk. There's a chilling irony here. Thailand's medical cannabis industry is booming. Weed dispensaries are opening in tourist zones faster than coffee shops. Affluent entrepreneurs, mostly in Bangkok, are making fortunes selling products once punishable by prison. Meanwhile, in the same country, men are serving life sentences
for far smaller infractions, tied to a different drug class, many of them too poor to afford proper representation. Is this justice, or just another system where money buys freedom, and poverty becomes a sentence? The government insists the war is about public safety, about order, but critics say it's targeting the wrong enemy. The traffickers at the top remain largely untouched. It's the couriers, the desperate. Those are the ones who get caught in the teeth of the machine. One pill, one mistake, one forgotten life. But there's another type of story waiting on the border, one that's rarely told. It's about a jungle, a hidden zone where borders blur and laws evaporate, and it's where the drug trail really begins. Number 9. Sold for smiles. The ghosts of sex tourism. Do you remember reality number 1? The neon lights, the flirtatious laughter, the carefully curated illusion. This is where that illusion ends. The beach is quiet now. Abandoned bars sag under sun-bleached signs. Rusting lanterns dangle from bamboo awnings. A single wooden bulletin board stands crooked, nailed into soft sand, and on it, faces printed on torn paper, some faded into ghosts. Missing girls, names scrawled in Thai and English. Ages beside them, some as young as 14. Last seen in Patong, Pattaya Koh Samui. Any information please call. But no one is calling. This is the aftermath of what many still call entertainment. The kind of tourism that built industries and broke lives. That took a smile and stretched it until it cracked. The sex tourism economy in Thailand wasn't born by accident. It was engineered, fed by military bases, then normalized by magazines and men who thought passports were passes. Brothels rebranded themselves as massage parlor. Go-go bars became a tourist experience. And over time what should have been a national emergency turned into a brochure feature. But for the women behind the smile, it's a different story. Many come from Isan, or the north, poor villages, single-parent homes or no home at all. They're pulled in through promises, jobs at resorts, work as waitresses, cash to send back to their children, and then the story shifts. Suddenly there's debt, fake documents, confiscated passports, threats that reach beyond borders. This isn't a few bad actors. It's an industry. Some are trafficked through Laos or Myanmar, passed between handlers like inventory. Others are sold by people they trusted. In certain provinces, middlemen operate openly, recruiting at temples, schools, even beauty contests. And once inside the system, escape becomes a fantasy. Some end up in high-end karaoke bars in Bangkok, hidden behind tinted glass and coded menus. Others are shipped offshore to karaoke dens in Malaysia, Korea, even Australia. Their stories vanish across borders. Their names vanish from law enforcement systems that rarely talk to each other. But the trauma doesn't vanish. Thailand has some of the highest suicide rates in Southeast Asia, and if you trace those numbers back far enough, you start to see a pattern. Women who came from the bar districts, women with no family records, no legal defense, no second chance. Their abuse is rarely spoken of publicly, because shame in Thailand is not just personal, it's cultural, and for many women, death seems like the only way out of it. What makes this all more jarring is how invisible it still is. Ask a tourist about Thai hospitality, and they'll rave. Ask them about the nightlife, and they'll smile knowingly. Ask them about the thousands of girls who never made it home, and they'll pause. The truth is, they were never meant to notice, because the system depends on invisibility, on the belief that everyone here is smiling, happy, that what happens in Bangkok stays there, that the girl on your arm isn't someone's sister or someone's mother or someone still bleeding from the last customer. But some do try to speak. Some run, some survive. They gather in shelters funded by scraps of foreign aid. They whisper in groups too afraid to speak loudly. Some even go back because there's nothing left for them outside. There's a beach town where one woman used to keep a ledger. She'd write the names of those who made it out, and beside them in tiny letters, how they left by foot, by flight, or by coffin. Her list is short. What does it cost to be desired? It costs visibility. It costs safety. It costs generations of girls who were taught to serve smiles, then punished for doing so. But this isn't just about women. There's a part of this country where the shadows grow longer, where silence becomes expectation, and what's done to girls in the bars is done to boys in places even darker. Number 10. Tradition meets plastic surgery. In a country where respect is built on appearances, beauty doesn't just open doors, it locks in survival. Thailand's obsession with beauty isn't a passing trend, it's a full-fledged industry, an expectation, a national priority woven deep into culture, class and opportunity. But what happens when the chase for perfection collides with centuries of tradition? Walk through central Bangkok, and the evidence is everywhere. Clinics line the avenues like coffee shops. Entire buildings are stacked floor to floor with cosmetic specialists, lip fillers, jawline reshaping, eye surgery, skin whitening. Even advertisements on public transport read more like menus. Double eyelid, $150, nose lift, free consultation. It's not about vanity. It's about value. Here, beauty is treated like qualification. It determines how you're greeted, what job you're offered, how well you're paid. It shapes marriage prospects and raises or ruins social status. It is so normalized that billboards for body contouring hang next to shrines, and no one blinks. There's a name for this phenomenon: crase, a Thai word that describes the pull of someone who is attractive, well-connected, and radiates influence. But crase doesn't come naturally. It's bought, manufactured, enhanced by needles, creams and procedures that promise transformation not just in appearance, but in fate. Thailand's beauty standards are among the most rigid in Asia. Light skin, narrow nose, big eyes, sharp jaw. These are not preferences. They are prerequisites. They reflect ideals imported decades ago, first from colonial ideas, then global media, now cemented by social platforms. The effect is so ingrained that even schoolgirls begin with skin whitening creams by age 12. But where tradition should resist, something strange has happened. Temples, once seen as sanctuaries from worldly pursuits, now coexist with beauty clinics. Some monks are even asked to bless cosmetic surgeries, not metaphorically, literally. They chant prayers before operations. They sprinkle holy water over scalpel-marked forehead. In some clinics, monks are paid to offer merit for success in surgery, as if physical enhancement can also be spiritual improvement. This isn't fringe, it's widely accepted, because the line between sacred and superficial has blurred. What's more, medical tourism feeds this system. Foreigners flock to Thailand for affordable surgery. Packages include airport pickup, luxury recovery suites, sightseeing add-ons. The industry is booming because it offers more than low prices. It offers transformation with cultural validation. But for locals, especially young Thai women, the pressure is suffocating. Those who can't afford surgery are left behind, professionally, socially, romantically. They're reminded every day, the less attractive you are, the more invisible you become. And for those who can afford it, it doesn't end at one procedure. There's always another fix, another enhancement, another correction. Beauty becomes maintenance, and maintenance becomes addiction. Nose jobs lead to cheekbone implants. Lip tints lead to jaw shaving. It's not unusual to meet a 25-year-old who's already had 5 operations. But the real cost isn't just the medical bill. It's the psychological weight of never being enough, of measuring worth in centimeters, of turning every mirror into a critique. And in a society where saving face is paramount, no one talks about the depression that comes after the bandages are removed, or the botched surgeries that clinics quietly erase, or the young men, yes, men who are beginning to feel the same pressure and quietly undergoing procedures, with no one to tell. The irony is sharp. In a country proud of its culture, the most celebrated faces are often the least natural. And in trying to conform to a borrowed ideal of beauty, people are slowly erasing the very features that made them unique. So what happens when identity becomes an expense? When every flaw is a debt? There's a festival in Thailand where people wear masks to welcome spirit. It's loud, strange, and centuries old, but when you look closer it feels familiar, because these days, masks aren't reserved for the dead. They're sold to the living. smoothed over with injections, sculpted with knives, blessed by monks, then filtered for the world to admire. And while some wear them proudly, others wear them because they no longer know what's underneath. But in Thailand, masks don't just appear at festivals. Some walk, some speak, and some enforce silence.
Number 11. The Ghost Festival That's All Too Real. In the northeastern town of Dan Sai, strange things march through the street every year. Tall, twisted figures with grotesque wooden faces, long noses, painted teeth, stretched grins, some laughing, some howling, costumes stitched from rags, cowbells strapped to hips. Children squeal, tourists laugh, locals bow. This is Phai Ta Khon, Thailand's Ghost Festival. It looks playful, it looks staged, but the truth is much older than the paper mache. Because what you're watching isn't just a celebration, it's a warning. The origin of Phai Ta Khon is hazy. Some say it started with spirits disturbed by a resurrection. Others say it's a leftover from ancient fertility rites. But what matters is the message. The dead walk among the living, and sometimes they don't leave. Unlike most Thai festivals, Phai Ta Khon doesn't try to look beautiful. It doesn't smile for photos. It leans into fear, the slow parades, the drumming that doesn't match any rhythm. The performers who don't dance, they stagger. There's something off, like everyone knows something the outsider doesn't, and they do. Because this isn't just for tourists. It's not just for fun. It's a way of dealing with the things that never made it to the afterlife. Regret, shame, broken promises, unacknowledged truth. In this part of Thailand, people still believe in spirits. They don't mean it metaphorically, they mean it literally. You hear it in the markets. Don't whistle at night. Don't step over food offerings. Don't speak ill of the dead near trees. In the countryside, almost every home has a spirit house. Not as decoration, but as insurance. To appease, to distract, to keep peace with whatever watches from the shadows. Even urban Thais, those in Bangkok's towers and Chiang Mai's cafes, quiet down when the topic shifts to the supernatural. They may scoff, but no one jokes too loud. That's the thing about belief here. It doesn't ask for proof. It just lingers. And when you step outside the parade and into the alleys of Dan Sai after sunset, the masks don't seem so playful anymore. The way they hang in doorways, tilt in shop windows, the way they seem to turn slightly when no one's watching, like they've picked something up or left something behind. Animism runs deep in Thailand, deeper than Buddhism. It's an undercurrent that touches everything. Ceremonies, construction sites, politics. Spirits aren't just in forests and temples. They're in meetings, marriages, accidents. If something goes wrong, it's rarely considered random. Someone or something was upset. That's why people don't just pray, they negotiate. Spirit mediums are still consulted before major decisions. Exorcisms still take place in rural temples and in government offices. Yes, even there. Staff often offer red soda or cigarettes at small shrines, not to be festive, but to keep the invisible world from interfering. This blend between ancient animism and modern Thai Buddhism creates a quiet tension. One religion teaches detachment and peace. The other teaches fear and trade-offs. And they both exist side by side. One written in scripture, the other etched into instinct. Which brings us back to the masks. Because the most haunting part of Phai Ta Khon isn't the faces, it's the silence behind them. The way performers refuse to speak during processions. The way villagers avert their eyes. The way nobody explains why some people wear the same mask every year, but never seem to age. And when it's over, when the last bell stops ringing, and the streets clear, there's no celebration, no grand finale, just people returning to homes where lights are left on longer than usual, where mirrors are covered, where everyone acts like nothing happened, but they don't sleep quite right for days. And that's the part that sticks. Because here's the truth. The scariest ghosts aren't the ones you see. They're the ones you're warned never to talk about. And in Thailand, some of them hold office. Number 12. Boys of Silence. The hidden abuse of young males. It's easy to miss them. That's the point. In the daytime, they sweep floors at guest houses, fold towels at budget hotels or run errands through alley markets. No one really notices, and at night, they vanish. Some slip into back rooms. Others are loaded into vans, and when they disappear, really disappear, no one puts up posters, no one files reports, no one even asks the right questions. In Thailand, when abuse is talked about, it usually has a face, and that face is often female. But there's a truth few are willing to say out loud. Boys are disappearing too, and many never come back. Most are orphans, stateless, runaways, boys with no last names and no paper trail. They come from poor border regions. Some from Laos, others from Cambodia, many from the hill tribes up north. Some are sold by relatives. Others leave thinking they're heading for real work. But the destinations they reach, those aren't workplaces. They're holdings, often disguised as charities, sometimes just labeled training centers. And what happens behind those doors rarely gets written down. Thailand has become known for its glossy tolerance. Smiling drag queens on TV, flamboyant pride parades, pink taxis with rainbow flags. But tolerance is not the same as protection, especially when it comes to children, and especially when the victims aren't part of any acceptable narrative. Because people can imagine an exploited girl, they can feel sorry for her. But a boy, that becomes more complicated. And in that complication, silence grows. Massage parlors are everywhere in tourist zones. But look again, some have rear staircases not shown to customers. Some have two sets of price boards, one visible, the other hidden. In places like Pattaya or parts of Chiang Mai, there's an unspoken code. The younger ones don't work the front. There's special requests. The rooms they're kept in aren't technically illegal, because nothing is technically recorded. And law enforcement, it's not always absent. It's just uninterested. Most of these boys don't even legally exist. No ID, no birth certificate, not even a place in the education system. So when something goes wrong, when a boy is found abused or worse, he isn't even listed as a citizen harmed. He's a blank entry. A case closed before it ever opens. What makes it worse is how normalized it's become in some circles. There are whisper networks among foreign predators, those who fly in under the banner of volunteer work, orphan outreach, or educational sponsorship. Some even operate as rogue NGOs. And because Thailand's reputation is wrapped in warmth and tourism, few outsiders question the paperwork or the lack of it. Locals know, but speaking up has a cost. Teachers who report disappearances sometimes lose their job. NGOs trying to expose networks suddenly face inspections, tax threats or visa issues. It's a system built to be untraceable. And if a boy fights back, if he runs or accuses or escapes, he often ends up in juvenile detention, charged with loitering, theft or worse. Because in the absence of identity, guilt becomes automatic. There are shelters that try. A few good people risk a lot to help, but they're overwhelmed and underfunded and forced to work in the shadows just like the ones they're trying to save. So the cycle continues. A van pulls up at a cheap guest house. A boy steps out. He's small. He doesn't speak Thai. He's wearing clothes too big for his frame. The woman at reception nods, doesn't ask questions, and hands over a key. That boy won't be on the guest log. And if he's hurt, there'll be no complaint. And the worst part, it's all hidden in plain sight, behind smiles, behind massage signs, behind the myth that Thailand's problems only affect women. But they're not the only ones who vanish, because boys are easier to silence and easier to erase. Number 13. The jungle, where the border blurs. There are places maps don't like to explain. The lines are there, but they're just that, lines. Thin, abstract, powerless, not walls, not laws, and certainly not protection. Here in the northern reaches of Thailand, the trees don't recognize nations. The vines drape over 3 borders, like it's all one land. Because for the people who live in it, it is Thailand, Myanmar, Laos, the fabled Golden Triangle, a place that was once whispered about in spy novels, drug trials, and opium war documentaries. But those stories, those are old headlines. The reality is far more current and far more quiet. The jungle is thick, not cinematic thick,
but suffocating. You can't see more than a few meters ahead. The air is hot, wet and heavy with something else, fear. Maybe, or just the absence of explanation. Villages appear suddenly small, stilted homes with bamboo walls, and the smell of firewood and fermented rice. There's a rhythm to life here, but it's one built on caution. People speak softly. They don't say names. They don't ask questions about who controls the hills, because here control isn't about flags. It's about men with radios and rifles, about footpaths that don't show up on Google Maps, about unofficial taxes, and shipments that move at night. Drugs, mostly. Meth in particular, yaba, as it's known locally. Tiny orange pills that fuel a billion-dollar trade across Southeast Asia. But it's not just drugs anymore. It's arms, fuel, timber, people, and the strange part, no one really seems to be in charge, and yet everyone knows who to avoid. This is not an abandoned place. It's not lawless. It's just governed differently. By silence. By old loyalties. By a currency that has nothing to do with bot. Local villagers harvest poppy. Not because they're criminals, but because it's what grows here. It's what pays. Schools in these areas are often empty. Police stations, if they exist, are dusty, underused buildings guarded by men who look more scared than authoritative. There are checkpoints, but not all of them are state-run. Some are managed by militias, some by private forces linked to unknown sponsors. And everyone knows to hand over a little something to pass safely. Cash, cigarettes, information. And then there are the stories of tourists who wandered too far off the beaten trail, of backpackers who thought they were adventuring but were really trespassing. Some return, confused and quiet. Others don't return at all. The authorities issue warnings, but they're generic. Exercise caution. Respect local customs. What they don't tell you is that once you pass a certain ridge, Thailand stops being Thailand in any meaningful way. It becomes a limbo, a breathing space between three governments, none of which truly control it, all of which deny responsibility. Sometimes the jungle itself hides things that can't be unhidden. A boy in a soccer jersey carries a package twice his size. He's no older than 10. He doesn't look around. He doesn't smile. He's been trained, not in school but in survival. A woman cooks noodles near a shaded hut. At first glance, she's just a food vendor, but under the counter is a radio with a coded channel. She's not feeding travelers. She's feeding runners. Look long enough, and you'll start to see them too. Quiet figures, muddy boots, no eye contact, and yet life continues. Chickens cluck, children laugh, the sun still rises. That's the hardest part about this place. It wears normalcy like camouflage. So what do you do when a jungle becomes a blind spot for the world? When borders don't protect, they conceal. And when a paradise for tourists masks a corridor for trafficking, what does that say about who's really lost? Some trails here are closed for a reason, and some disappearances don't leave footprint.
Number 14. The monk who stopped believing. He once wore orange robes, not the kind sold in Bangkok's tourist markets, but the real ones folded in perfect symmetry, tied around a shaved head, worn with reverence, routine, and restraint. For years he woke before the sun, walked barefoot for alms, chanted in Pali, under flickering temple candles, and taught the Four Noble Truths to anyone who asked. Today he walks down a busy road in Chiang Mai wearing jeans and sunglasses, holding a plastic cup of iced coffee. It's not an unusual sight anymore. Thailand has more than 300,000 monks registered under the National Buddhist Order. Temples fill the cityscapes, dot the hills, and anchor every village. Buddhism here is not just a religion, it's the moral backbone of society, the invisible curriculum taught to children before they even learn to write. And yet over the last 2 decades, that image, quiet, stoic, humble, has started to crack. It began subtly, a luxury car parked in a monastery's driveway, a monk caught scrolling on an iPhone during prayers, jet-setting abbots on private planes, money laundering allegations. Then it got louder, sexual abuse cases, drug-related arrests, political ties that were once kept discreet, now displayed in headlines. And still the temples remained full, but something else emptied. The man walking through Chiang Mai isn't angry, he's tired. He's spent 10 years behind temple walls, only to realize that the chance didn't always match the choices. He tells his story often, though not publicly, not for fear of consequences, but out of disappointment, because he believed in what it was supposed to be, a path of detachment, a life of truth, and instead it became a front. He remembers when a senior monk told him to accept donations from a wealthy businessman for the temple, he was told, but the envelope was handed in secret. No receipts, no prayers, just silence. And what does silence mean when you're supposed to be the voice of moral clarity? But here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. This disillusionment isn't rare. Across Thailand, more and more young monks are leaving, not to rebel but to recover, to unlearn the politics hiding behind the lotus flowers, to ask questions that aren't welcome inside the monastery walls, like why the robe can't protect children from abuse, or why monks accused of crimes are quietly reassigned, not removed. And yet Buddhism itself is not on trial. The teachings still speak. The ideas of mindfulness, detachment, compassion, they still guide millions. It's the institution that's come under question, the structure, the unchecked authority, the immunity from criticism disguised as respect. So what happens when a monk stops believing? He walks into the world again, not to destroy it, but to see it without the filter, without the incense, without the layers of tradition that once blinded him from corruption, hidden in plain sight. He doesn't curse the temple, he just doesn't trust it anymore. He finds his own peace on a park bench, or in a crowded cafe, or watching children play near a golden stupa that still rings at sunset. And maybe that's the saddest part. The sound is still beautiful, but the meaning is no longer the same. When a society's spiritual guardians lose faith, what happens to the people they once guided? And in a country where monks are supposed to embody moral purity, who steps in when the robe is no longer enough? The question lingers like smoke after incense has burned out. Because belief doesn't vanish overnight. Sometimes it just fades into silence, until someone dares to speak again. And speaking, it turns out, is what the next generation is starting to do, even when they're told not to, even when the stakes are high. Because in the face of quiet obedience, some have chosen to sing. Number 15. The nation that's smiling through a storm. The murals appear first, not on gallery walls, but down alleyways, subway tunnels, the backs of old cinemas, spray-painted fists, cartoon ducks, satirical portraits too clever to be called insults, too bold to be dismissed as art. They don't stay long, painted over by morning, replaced by new ones by dusk. That's how resistance breathes now. In Thailand, protest doesn't always come with megaphone. Sometimes it's a QR code stuck to a lamppost that links to banned history. Sometimes it's a poem written on the bottom of a noodle box. Sometimes it's a flash mob in school uniforms, bowing silently in a mall, then vanishing before security can figure out what happened. This is how the country's youngest generation fights a storm they were born into. They've never known a Thailand without the monarchy's shadow. They grew up reciting royal anthems in school, standing for the king's image, in cinemas, watching their parents whisper whenever politics came up. For decades the rule was simple: question anything, accept it, but rules have an expiration date, especially when they feel like cages. In 2020 the students snapped the silence. High schoolers, teenagers, 20-year-olds with taped mouths and handwritten signs marched into the heart of Bangkok. They asked questions no one had dared to ask on camera. Why is our education system built to obey, not to think? Why do the rich keep getting richer while the poor stay loyal? And the most radioactive question of all, why does the crown wear immunity? The government cracked down fast. Water cannons, riot shields, detentions without trial. Even satire was punished. People were arrested for TikTok videos. University lecturers lost their jobs for quoting the wrong authors. A child with a protest sign was charged with threatening national security. And yet, the voices didn't stop. Because it wasn't just about monarchy anymore, it was about memory. Young people had watched their grandparents get crushed in the Red Shirt massacre. They had seen corruption go viral on Twitter, watched election results get erased, and realized something that hit harder than any riot baton: no one was coming to save them.